I think the hardest thing today is, cutting through the noise, figuring out what works, where to incorporate AI, and not losing the plot. If I look at my desktop right now, I have Codex open, I have Claude Code open, I have Clay open, I have DeepLine open. I didn't even know what DeepLine was yesterday. Am I losing focus on what I really need to have my attention on? Business fundamentals, right? Like, am I getting so far away into all this other stuff? We get to a place where AI can be more of an assistive in terms of helping people in sales in that sales motion, spend more time selling, right? And maybe spend less time updating the CRM. I think we were getting closer, and then AI happened, and then Claude happened. And once Claude happened, it was game over. The things that you can do, it boggles the mind.
Welcome back to the B2B Playbook, where we believe that great go-to-market is built on people, not platforms. Today, we are joined by Pasha Irshad, a RevOps god and the co-founder of Shape and Scale, a consultancy that works with B2B companies to fix the systems, process, and data underneath their go-to-market motion. What makes Pasha unusual in the RevOps space is that he doesn't start with the tech. He starts with the process, the data, the strategy that the tech is supposed to serve. And after nearly 2 decades across content, demand gen, paid media, CRM, analytics, you name it, he's done it. RevOps, he's overseen over 50 HubSpot implementations as well. He's absolutely one of the best in the biz, and it's why we had to get him back on the show for a second time. He knows what is going on. He knows how to fix it. So today, together with Adam Mandarovich, the co-founder of CRO School, creator of Closed Circuit Selling, we're going to explore what RevOps is today, the challenges that the function faces, why the CRM is often a record of optimism more so than what's actually happening, and what it would take to build a revenue system that reconnects the market, sales, and customer success so we can all work as one unit. Pasha, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, it's great to meet or be here again. I've met you countless times.
That's right. Absolutely. Friend of the show, friend of mine. And would you say you're friends with Adam or more acquaintances at this stage?
No, we're friends, man. I've been following y'all for a long time. So it's always nice to be here.
And Adam, thank you for being here as well as always.
Yeah. I haven't quit one of these collabs just yet.
All right, Pasha, let's get right into it. RevOps, what's the hardest thing about being in RevOps right now, man?
Not being a GTM engineer. No, I'm just kidding. I might be a GTM engineer as well. I'm actually not sure what I am anymore. It's funny. Multidisciplined, I guess. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think while I joke, I do think that maybe is the hardest thing about being in RevOps, because if you remember, like 1 to 2 years ago, that was the job title that everybody was searching for. And then Clay came on the scene, and they didn't create a category. They actually created like a job that is GTM engineering. And now you have AI. And so I think the hardest thing about RevOps today is kind of making sense of it all. And I think it's funny when you talk about RevOps and you think about, there's multiple definitions that I think work for it. But if you do think about it as bringing together customer facing departments and, kind of making them work together, right, to have data that your team can trust and make predictable decisions around in order to scale, then each one of those departments is facing what I would consider some level of which I don't want to say imposter syndrome, but they are facing anxiety, right? Because every day you get up and you get on LinkedIn and somebody's built a new OS that basically takes every piece of their brain from, today and back until they were in high school. And you're like, dude, how do I keep up with all that? Right. Before this started, we were joking that, 6 months ago, people were like, oh, well, I don't know about uploading the data into OpenAI and they're going to do something with the data. And literally when I log in and you go anywhere, it's now, if you don't have 8 agents working for you at the same time in the CRM, you are a laggard and you are a Luddite. So I say all that to say, I think the hardest thing about being in RevOps today is making sense of what's real, what's not, being able to communicate that to leadership, because I think RevOps has moved from a maybe just like a very I think RevOps has moved from like being seen as a support function maybe 5 years ago, and before that into more of a strategic function, right? And so in that, you are now having to not only prove that strategic worth, but stay ahead of not, we've done the vendor report for, MarTech vendor report grows every year. But now on top of that, you have to stay ahead of the models, and you have to stay ahead of the changes, and you have to stay ahead of being able to use that in a way that actually benefits the organization that you're working at. So it's a very long-winded way of saying, I think the hardest thing today is, cutting through the noise, figuring out what works, where to incorporate AI, where it makes sense, and not losing the plot, right? Like, one thing that I wrestle with every day is I'm in literally, if I look at my desktop right now, I have Codex open, I have Claude Code open, I have Clay open, I have DeepLine open. I didn't even know what DeepLine was yesterday, right? I have all these things open, and sometimes I just say, like, am I losing focus on what I really need to have my attention on, which is just general, which I consider is like business fundamentals, right? Like, am I getting so far away into all this other stuff that I am not tending to the things that matter the most, which is the unsexy stuff, which is the things that maybe were, talked about more a year or two ago.
Yeah. I feel myself falling into the same trap as well. And when you think about what we're doing with a lot of this, it's like the 1-2% improvement, but the business fundamentals are the things that make the really big swings. Like, you could have someone trying to optimize the crap out of, their go-to-market, but they haven't stopped to think, hey, is this market that we're actually pushing into like a growing segment? Are there any tailwinds? Is there a good amount of demand for what we're really selling in this market? Or are we just like going super hard and we haven't even asked like the business basics questions? And I think, Pasha, you might have checked out our book, Closed Circuit Selling, and that's something that we're really trying to bring back as well. Is it's all well and good to stitch all this information together, but do you have the answers to the basic questions that you should have asked? And in a lot of organizations, we're finding the answer is no.
Yeah, and I think I do have the book back there. I should have brought it closer, but you could probably see it behind me. I think when in the book, right, I think a reframe that I thought about is revenue is really an architecture problem, right? It's not a sales problem. So, I think team stack methodologies, it can be MedPick or Challenger or Spin, but they do that on top of a kind of a broken operating system and wonder why nothing compounds. I think that's why it resonated so much with me, because from if we think about AI, right, and like what it takes for AI to run, AI is not going to run if you have completely broken data and dirty data and a lack of data quality, right? But data quality is generally a symptom, and that symptom is going to be, the processes in and around the way that you go to market and all of the things that you do and you measure and you touch, from when something enters the CRM to a rep blog something to, all the way when somebody becomes a customer. So if you look at those two things, like revenue being an architecture problem, not a sales problem, and then just the idea of stacking methodologies from a sales perspective, or stacking more AI tools on top of a broken kind of operating system or foundation, the only thing that's going to compound is shit, right? It's just like, it's not going to improve anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Adam, how do you reflect on that and what Pasha is saying? I can see you chomping at the bit.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask earlier what you said around what RevOps is now becoming versus what it was before. It's kind of backwards to go forwards, right? Because it's really turning back into the guardrails of what a commercial manager or a CRO used to be, but not necessarily is widely understood, because you've now got to manage the interdepartmental connection and the data lakes in between them, right? But that was always like a commercial management role. So what I see is that like the RevOps function now is getting a seat at the table because they've almost gone full circle back to what a commercial manager was in the early 2000s. But with the modern twists of how to facilitate those data lakes, the infrastructure, the technology stacks, and understanding that underwriting between. That was my first question I was going to ask, like, is that an accurate reflection of what you're saying also?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it really depends on the size of the company that I work with and the different teams that I work with. But obviously, I think where it has the most success is where it is a strategic, it is a strategic role, right? And it's not the firefighting. It's not tickets and, fix this thing this week. It's best when it can focus on upstream problems and solve those upstream before they become issues downstream. And that's what I talk a lot about my clients, the idea of just like looking upstream to try to get, trying to focus on like where problems start so they don't snowball. But I would also say that I think at the bottom layer of the job, the data cleanup and, reporting and, things like that, I do think that's where AI can be genuinely useful inside of an organization, right? If you can harness that for the lower level tasks. I don't believe that replaces anybody, but I think it augments it.
So do you then see, because you spoke, thank you for that acknowledgement and the kindness that you've said about our book. Do you then still see that the guardrails of that facilitation is only as good as the information that they're putting in? Because it's not like the reps doing the work kind of make RevOps work harder if they're only still kind of following like the broken methodologies that caused the problem in the first place. So for example, if they're not spacing out to say this is segmented by time, this is what they've said about the incumbent, this is what it's going to take to win, and that's not spanned in an architecture across the organization, you're only as good as the information that you can read and perceive, but the rest of the organization is only as good as that information that you can then disperse. But if the organization is still not operating from the right catchment of that account intelligence, they're pushing shit uphill.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where, I think that's, especially when I think about the book, right? If we're thinking about a mentality where it's about understanding, not just booking meetings, right? So that's like fundamentally an organizational ethos that needs to be really shared across all different departments, right? I think it also goes back to the same thing that if marketing and sales and success are all measured on different outcomes, it's still going to be very hard to stitch that all together, right? So I think those two things go hand in hand if you think about it. But, the idea of like who your current vendor is and what do they want to improve and when does the contract end? I think these are like, to me, what I consider kind of like key elements of the go-to-market process that need to be defined, and that those should make up in some way the architecture that you've got built into your CRM, right? If we're thinking about like, what are your operationally required like properties, right? Like when we just think about like, what data does your engine need to run that always needs to be updated, that always needs to be fresh, that always needs to have something in it, then like those are conversations when we talk about strategy before systems that have to happen upstream, right? Like it can't be something that you shoehorn in, and then on top of that you have half the team running the challenger methodology and the other half running something completely different.
Do you think that is because what we're talking about is almost, well, it's like a CEO looks at what they need backwards from revenue with a fine-tooth comb versus the people that are kind of pushing against it have a vested interest in the individual methodologies to each department. And then the second part of that is, do you then see a division of the role that can now see what you're seeing from the RevOps lens versus the ones that are pushing against it, going further in the GTME direction, because they're not seeing that. So they're just saying, I can make more money if I push as many of these things into hypothetical buckets as possible. But they maybe haven't had the hat of the overarching architecture like within their control. So they can't actually, like, they're not willing to see it. Maybe that's why coming up through some of those stories within the book, it's kind of looking at it backwards from revenue, backwards via action architecture, right? But that's not how the individual people come up from each of those departments, because they're not in charge of those or that lens.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a few things, right? Again, it goes back to like the ethos of the organization. So if you're in like hyper growth mode and you're hiring, right? Let's just say you're hiring and you don't have like those processes and playbooks in place, and everybody's not singing from the same choir sheet, then it's the same thing for people using their own tools, right? Like, I mean, it's the same reason that people prefer using a spreadsheet to the CRM, because it's what they did before and it's easier for them. And it's not necessarily their fault, but when you're dropped into a situation and you're asked to start cold calling on the fourth day, and I just was in the sales subreddit last night, right? Like, I see these things all the time, right? Like, sellers are being forced in these positions that I think are just like insane and like just don't make any sense to me. Then, I mean, what do you really expect is going to happen, right? Like, when the pressure's on, like Mike Tyson says, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right? And so if you're in an organization that's consistently getting punched in the mouth and there's no real direction, then like people are going to scramble and they're going to go with the things that they're most comfortable with. And guess what? That might not align to what the CEO wants or really their managers want, because there is just almost like a Lord of the Flies-esque mentality that's broken out.
I think just for context, sorry, just for me to jump in here, I think just for context for our listeners, I mean, what we're referring to here is how a lot of sales teams, you often have incentives based on meetings booked. So people obviously try and book as many meetings without thinking, are they a good fit for our business? Are these people even going to turn up to the meetings? And then you have people try and push the deal across the line because they're incentivized on, closed deals with no thought as to whether that customer again is a good fit and whether they'll churn and whether your business is upside down on the deal at all. Then you have marketing who are incentivized on MQLs. Many of which, aren't actually a good predictor as to whether someone's ready to buy or not ready to buy. And we end up with a very expensive system that fills the top of funnel, which then tries to pass leads over to sales. Sales calls them, says these leads are garbage. And then marketing is just working towards a metric that sales completely ignores and is just kind of expensive for the business, because then marketing doesn't do what we would call real marketing. Just to set the context there for our listeners, Adam, and then I'll let you get back to what you were saying.
I was just going to add, for additional context for people that are listening that may not have listened to all of our other shows, that happened around the time of the Book of Predictable Revenue. But if people that have actually spent the time to actually understand Aaron Ross's intent, that wasn't his intent at all. That's just how the market misunderstood using meetings booked as the measure. What he was actually suggesting was like architecture across the business via the conveyor belt to make it easier for specified roles. The downstream repercussion of the market misunderstanding of that has also then skipped what happens between business development and the account management team. Whereas now we could say 10 out of 10 people that George and I speak to, Pasha, have never even seen a communication plan handover from account executives to account management to bring like what's going to happen, how serviceable is the contract, how often would you like to see us, who's involved, who are the backup contacts. They've never seen that before. So it's kind of stands to reason that all of these things are coming to like a long ahead. That's just giving some additional scope on what you've covered off on there, George.
You know, we talk a lot on this channel about how the secret to B2B marketing and sales is making sure that people remember you when the need arises. Well, this is our time. We're here to tell you we're actually a B2B demand generation agency too. We're not just education and upskilling. So we don't just do the strategy for you, but we also specialize in B2B channels like LinkedIn, Google, Meta, and Reddit. So if you need an agency for the first time, or if you just want to see how we stack up compared to your current one, head to the b2bplaybook.com to learn more and book a time to chat if you're ready. Okay, let's get back to it. So then is RevOps in a position, I mean, Pasha, I love your approach of like looking upstream. Is RevOps in a position to fix this, or can kind of be maybe the champion for fixing some of this? Because I mean, RevOps, what normally probably reports to a CRO. It probably depends on the structure of the teams, but reports up to a CRO. Ultimately, it's the CRO who recommends or implements incentives and measurements, and that's what drives a lot of this. Do you think RevOps can change a lot of this themselves, or do they need to be the champion for it?
I think it just all depends I think RevOps can fix the system, but I don't believe that it can fix, I don't believe it can fix the will necessarily. Because if RevOps is reporting into somebody, well, who are they reporting into? And again, it just becomes the idea of having, many masters, right? Like it's hard to please everybody. Um, I think like incentives, ownership, executive will, those are things that have to come at an organizational level, unless, of course, you've got maybe RevOps reporting directly to the CEO and they have that kind of pull. I mean, I think that's basically what it boils down to. I would also just kind of double back on what y'all were talking about in terms of like what's getting logged into CRM. I mean, I've worked with organizations before where, you're looking at, pipeline starts getting opened up on like the pre-discovery, and I was like looking at the numbers and I'm like, what the fuck is this? And I wouldn't blame you. There's no blame really, right? It's just there's a lot when like there's just a lot of pressure. And I think when, if there's not like necessarily any real oversight into the data going in there, then you are going to see a lot of you're going to see a lot of inflation, right? Like in terms of pipeline or deals advancing on optimism versus actual exit criteria, or, you know, um, never close lost in anything because it hurts, right? So if you're incentivized, or you have, sometimes it's not even incentivized as much as it is, you have in, pipeline numbers that are just impossible to hit, and your job depends on it, and you're feeding your family. And again, I would say like, I think a lot of people need to spend more time where I think sellers hang out, because just, going in some of the subreddits, like the stuff that I see, it's great. It's just heart kind of goes out to these folks, right? So the hope would be we get to a place where AI can be more of an assistive in terms of helping people in sales in that sales motion spend more time selling, right? And maybe spend less time updating the CRM. Or if we're asking questions in each one of our discovery calls or pre-discovery calls where we're cataloging the market, right? And we're saying, hey, who's your current vendor? What are they looking to improve? When does the contract end? Then it's as simple as setting up a smart property in HubSpot that scans your transcripts, right? And if you're using a HubSpot note taker, then it can automatically append that property with that data. And then there you go, right? Like that's just a small example. I'm not here to hawk HubSpot, but what I'm trying to do is just, I've been trying to think more of like, what are some common sense applications of AI that are bite sized that can actually like help people, as opposed to, some like operating system, like the 90th operating system that I've seen, on LinkedIn. I mean, I have my own operating system, right? But it's, I say it tongue in cheek, but I think you understand where I'm going with that.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know, Pasha, across all your HubSpot implementations, how many, if any, have you seen where salespeople are logging things like the key questions that we talk about in closed circuit selling, like current vendor, contract renewal date, likes, dislikes, permission to circle back, that kind of thing.
It's interesting. Like I work with a lot of different industries, right? So I work with IT service providers. I work with federal, obviously being in the DC area, healthcare, man, like even like renewables. So I work across a lot. I don't see a lot of that, right? Generally. And that's not to denigrate anybody that I work with or I've ever worked with, but I think a lot of the times it's not always a well-oiled machine. And I usually am coming into a data environment that is very, it's very messy, it's very dirty. And generally if you're hiring me, it's not because your systems are running smoothly, right? So there's probably some bias there. Um, but it is, I think, when you like up level it a little bit, I think what it speaks to is that there generally isn't that architecture that's kind of guiding the organization that everything rolls up to that. And I think that the lack of that is why you see what you do in terms of the outputs that you get.
George, you and I both have benefited from perhaps me having access to the great Mark Revell, right? Because even then, when that was happening, like 2009, I didn't recognize necessarily that was going to become universal until I did it. But once he showed me how, he just spelled it out like this. You need to know if there's a category requirement. How we do that right now is either ask who they're doing it with right now or how they're solving the problem. And then basically just asking, is there anything that they don't do that they should? And would there be a chance to show you what you're currently getting versus what's available out there right now? And that way you can just basically do that with everything. Like it doesn't even matter. Like you could be selling dog shit wrapped in alfoil. You would still need to ask who you're getting that from right now. And is there anything that they don't do that it should? Right? It's not rocket science. So that anyone says that this is like fantasy, it's pretty like the way that Mark would drill into us is that was very obvious. I guess I just was able to benefit from that to take it across industry. And then George was able to show further applications in terms of the architecture of what we've actually built. So we're thankful. I don't know what I was going to ask with the question.
I'm still distracted by the dog shit and alfoil. It's an example that Adam loves to use, and it's got me thinking if you have sold dog shit and alfoil before, or if it is something that you could. And I guess if you do sell it, it's only if there's a category requirement for it. You got to find someone who actually wants that, right? Which you might, on Oxford Street somewhere, right?
Yeah.
The right end of Oxford Street, you could find someone who wants it.
The end that you take me to. Yeah.
That's right. That's
is
right.
That where you? Oh, so Pasha, he wears like $1,200 sneakers, man.
I have this one pair of sneakers that I wear all the time, and then Adam told me yesterday apparently they're $1,200, and apparently I have 20 pairs of them.
Yeah.
So
I'm taking the piss, but I guess the reason that I use stupid analogies is because Mark drilled into us in the nicest possible way. That's how simple it is. So I guess, that's just what we were able to learn. And I was just able to see, to make really complex stuff that simple, and then bring other things into those processes of those circuits. I just thought it was obvious. And then what you're going to learn from having that connection to the market is obviously second to none. And that's not what teams are taught now. Hang on, now I know the question. So Pasha, do you think that the reason that so across industry sector we don't see this more from what you've said is because the people running these organizations possibly come up through the broken modeling after predictable revenue and they've never seen what end-to-end good looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it. I also just think, like I said at the start of the conversation, there's so much noise, right? There's so much noise and so much pressure that it's very hard to stay focused, right? Like And I think, George, you see this probably from a marketing perspective. I mean, I think that's one thing you guys have preached as well. It's like, I'd rather do a few things really well than do a lot of things really poorly. But when, you know, people are like, hey, your LinkedIn ads need to work in a month, and you're like, dude, our sales cycle's 9 months and LinkedIn ads don't work like that, as an example, then I mean, what, like there's just a huge disconnect. So I really think that is a huge piece of it. And then if I could bring in a sports analogy, I'm going to bring it in. Like whatever sport you play, if you bring on a team member and give them 3 months to learn the playbook, if there's even a playbook, and then that person is gone and you bring in somebody new and then they have their own playbook, who's going to do better? Is it going to be the person that's in the role for 3 months that's learning a new playbook? Is it going to be the person that's brought, or is it going to be the person that has been under that person that's now learning their second playbook in 6 months? Or is it the person that's been in the same role that's been able to sit with a playbook for 1 or 2 years, right? Who's going to grow the most? And so across all the different industries in marketing, sales, and ops, anybody that's got two eyes understands right now how insanely difficult it is to have longevity in these roles, right? Like it's all interconnected. So if you ask me, it's really like a symptom of a larger problem of if you look at the trajectory of like software and tools, intent data, and like as all that's gone up and to the right, you could probably do a correlation on jobs going, length and job going down, right? In some ways. So there's just so many different ways that are being pushed on people to fix certain problems. And like 9 times out of 10, the unsexy stuff is what fixes it, right? Like you don't necessarily need to run an AI agent on your CRM. You could just make it so not everybody in the organization can upload whatever data that they want into the CRM. You could do that, right? But you don't want to do that because that actually takes process and it takes time. So you say, no, let's bring on this data tool and you let that run, and then nobody ever uses it. And then when I come into your CRM, it's been there for a year and I'm like, hey, what is this? And you're like, oh, like that is just kind of what we see, or what I see.
That's a really, really good point. And Adam, I guess like we've been thinking about this as well, right? If you just have everyone running in their own different direction, and then all of a sudden these AI agents and tools make it very easy to collate all that information, upload it into your one source of truth, and that one source of truth all of a sudden becomes really muddied, doesn't it? Like if you don't have everyone working together from the same fundamentals, like it works if you're all working towards the same goal.
Well, I was going to ask you both an extension question. Is what we're saying that outrageous? Like, how did we get here where we're saying this is literally what we're saying end to end, right? If you have a sales team that goes out and validates the market, they get that information, right? So they then find out if there's a category requirement, and if there's not, when. Then it's like who across the organization would be valued in getting that information. And then who across like basically can then operate because you've collected the information. That's all we're saying. But the crux of that is that we're so far down a path that all of these broken sales methodologies have pushed all these departments so far apart. People that didn't grow up with that level of simplicity and architecture can't even see what we're saying, so they'll push against it to the ends of the earth. That's how I see it.
And I think it's in, I don't know. I mean, I know for the last 2 or 3 years, it's like always this talk of alignment, right? It's like alignment, and it's like, hey, we're going to have a meeting. But like, technically, alignment isn't a meeting, right? Like a meeting is just a group of people that are, like trying to come to a consensus on something. I actually don't know what the true definition of a meeting is, but I can tell you that it doesn't equal alignment, right? Like alignment is a shared definition of a, set of rules, standards, taxonomies that's agreed upon and then is enforced in the architecture of the organization. So there's a big difference between the two. And I think it's become another check a box thing where it's like, hey, we met with this team and yeah, but then in the meeting, everybody's doing something else, right? Like it's hard, unsexy work to create an architecture to it's like to do all the things that we're talking about, right? Especially from not only like I think Adam, what you're talking about, right? Getting kind of a sales team that's aligned around something like just what seems very simple, right? Like just understanding our who we're selling to, who their vendor is, what they want to improve, when the contract ends, if they're working with something. That all seems very simple. And yet, I mean, here we are, how many years later, and it doesn't seem that simple. And I think it's only getting more, it's only getting more difficult.
Yeah, I think it's going to have to come down to like a controlled atmosphere, Pasha. Like if we don't somehow build the guardrails to make all of that stupid easy for every department to become interconnected with the information, it's going to just get worse and worse because you've got all these people that will do absolutely anything other than validate the market from a first party intent. They'll do anything except do that, right? And they're just doing more and more of that, which means all of these departments are going to become further fragmented and further apart in terms of like what they should be doing versus what they are doing. And that's only going to get worse.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
If you like this channel, you're going to love the B2B Incubator. It's our demand generation course built for B2B marketers who are tired of doing random acts of marketing and whatever the business asks them to do. We show you how to take back control by implementing our 5Bs framework for demand generation and how to align more closely with sales. It's a top-rated course. We have over 315 graduates like Allison from Rivet, who credits the program with helping her drive 70% more pipeline for the business. We also show you how to use AI the right way, not to do more of everything worse, but to focus and do the right things and do them better. So if you're ready to take back control of your B2B marketing and be proactive instead of reactive, head to the b2bplaybook.com and check out our demand generation program to learn more. Okay, let's get on with the show. Pasha, I'm interested in your perspective on this. In the book, we kind of talk about how because sales stopped cataloging, and by cataloging sales are answering that question of who was in market and when, I felt like that job got pushed to marketing, like to try and answer, is this account in market? Are they not in market? And from what I have seen, like marketing is not very good at that because at the end of the day, so much of that comes down to what's happening internally in an organization. And you only get that information like contract renewal date, if they're with another vendor, when they're going to revisit that, or when that pain when that problem is painful enough. You only get that information by having like a one-to-one conversation. People aren't like posting that information so much online.
To cut in real quick, I work with a managed IT service provider. If there was one signal that I could get that would make the most difference, it's like when the other vendor is going to end. And guess what? I can't get that. I have 8 tools in front of me. I think that's a good example though, right? Like that industry is very, 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 I don't want to use the word commoditized, but it's very crowded. And yeah, I can know that you've had a cyber incident, but it doesn't really matter if you're locked in with somebody for 2 years, right? So I think that, yeah, that kind of backs into your point.
On top of that, well, I just don't know if, I don't think marketing should be the ones who are saying, yes, these people are in market, no, these people are not in market, which I think because we're told that that's what we're supposed to do, that's what causes the breakdown between sales and marketing. But if instead marketing just goes, hey, here's a bunch of accounts that are showing engagement, these are showing more than others. Sales, if you take the approach of cataloging, like who cares, right? We're making our best guess, but we're not promising anything. But if sales are cataloging rather than expecting to try and book meetings of every single one of these people that we send across, then I don't know. I think that responsibility should get shifted away from marketing because I just don't think we're equipped to handle it.
Yeah. I mean, I always wonder if we're just shuffling around shares on the deck, right? Like I was thinking to myself the other day is like, is the signal and the signal score the new MQL, right? Like if we have like the right signals, then it gets, I mean, you still don't have necessarily like a human layer, right? So I can see that you visit some pricing pages, and I can see that there's a news release that you've had an expansion, and I can see that, um, I mean, whatever the signals are, like it's is it that much different than what we, burn the MQL at the stake for? I don't know. It's more of a rhetorical question, but I think it goes back to your point of like, how can we really know when an account is in market? And I think you can do as much as you can from a rubric perspective to put in and around an account score and then push those over to sales. But like, unless you're doing some type of regression testing on those, right? Like it just kind of becomes the same thing.
I made a post on George's post last night, just reiterating like there still needs to have a human conversation to find out the first party intent, no matter how good the hypothetical targeting is. Like you could work out vertical niche to niche, which are going to be the best trigger signals for sales to have the conversation with the best conversion to get the information, whether that's going to be segmented by timing or whether that's going to be further out timing and product information. But someone still needs to have that conversation. And I can probably say this with absolute certainty. It's not going to be the CMOs of the world making those calls.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to make an analogy, it's like if you've ever done online dating, like you can text with a person and you can do all that stuff, right? You can just text, but until you meet them in person, you don't really know if there's going to be chemistry and it's going to lead to a relationship, right? And I think if you're doing some type of sales process that's longer than, a certain amount of time, then yeah, there is going to be a human element in that. And, I think we can do as much as we can on both sides of the aisle to get to that point as quickly as possible where we're having that kind of face-to-face conversation, but it's got to happen. So when does it happen? How does it happen? All those things are, I think, up for grabs, but I agree with you 100%. And I think, again, a lot of it's, look, man, I mean, a lot of this GTM engineering, which I've done, I've taken the courses, it's just like it's better spam, right? And I get it every day. People are masterfully get into my inbox and they're like, hey, I saw you commented. And I'm like, cool, I'll never look at that. I'll just never look at that ever again. I'll just extend the right to spam, right? Like that just doesn't work. So all of that is, I mean, I think we've seen on LinkedIn too, right? Like there's so much AI slop out there. I think people are going to continue to tune that out more and more and more. And so I do believe that the human element will still have a large kind of role to play. It's crazy that we're even saying that, but.
So what's going to cause the tipping point, Pasha, so that we can realign what we're spending, like I mean worldwide, on this hypothetical targeting, reinvest that in RevOps to man the guardrails and facilitate the infrastructure so sales can go back to being the tip of the spear and giving the information as a dissection across the organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of a lot of it does with how, company structure, right? How many people are on the cap table? How many investors do you have? I mean, generally when you get the first, second round, like a lot of pressure ramps up, right? Now there's more cooks in the kitchen. I can only speak to what I see. But that generally, not all the time, obviously, but oftentimes it can lead to misalignment and expectations that are not based in reality. And I think that's why you see like a lot of the problems that we do. Now from like a shift perspective, I think it's really hard to say just because right now things feel very messy. And I think generally the global economy is definitely a little bit on its back heels. So I'm very curious to kind of see like the trend and what comes out of that, right? We had the credit crisis in Silicon Valley a couple of years ago. I think you saw some belts get tightened. Obviously, from a technology perspective, you have a lot of different layoffs, and then you have a lot of people going into like, a lot of the GTM engineering role has been fueled by people that were in sales, right, in those SDR roles, and now they're kind of doing a career change, which I think is interesting, right? So I think like there's all this interplay, and I'm curious to see how it all shakes out. I can't say that I know where there will be some type of reinvestment or like a general reckoning, but I'm looking forward to the day.
I think we were almost going to get there, and then AI came in and they made it cheaper to make a bigger spam cannon. And I think people are so caught up in the hype of it, it's going to take us still a little while to realize that that's also not the answer. And I don't know if we're just going to keep trying to take the easy route as humans, or what looks like the easy route as humans, and excuse our old behavior because, oh, we didn't have this tool, rather than just getting back to the business fundamentals, which seem simple but can be hard to do, rather than just slapping on another piece of technology. I don't know what's next, and if we're almost going to get there, and then there's going to be the next new thing, and people get distracted by that again.
I mean, that's kind of what that leads back to what I was saying at the top of this is, like a lot of that stuff is a form of procrastination and distraction from doing the things that you really need to be doing from a business perspective. So I agree, though. I think we were getting closer, and then AI happened, and then Claude happened. And once Claude happened, it was game over, like it now. I mean, and it really is. Yeah. I mean, the things that you can do it boggles the mind. But I don't, and that's why I just ask myself, like, is this actually getting me closer to my goals for my clients, for my business, all those things? I think that's a question that we will see answered, sooner than later, hopefully.
I was thinking about the roles where we had done this really well coming up, right? Is it now, because looking at this from the outside in, is it a generational thing? So, for example, right, when I was coming up, people would have laughed you out of the room if you said you were going to become a manager before you were 30. Like now, people leading companies are like probably no older than 40, whereas the people teaching these fundamentals across these pillars across all industry sector when I came up were like 55, 60 years old. But those people, they're not leading these companies anymore, or these cross functions. Or prior to 2014, if you were head of sales or chief of sales, new business development, AEs, and account management reported to the same person. So you worked the contract end to end, and you knew you had full line of sight. Is the generational thing part of why we don't look at this in terms of like organizational infrastructure anymore?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably some truth to that, right? I think, again, it just depends on the type of sectors that you're into. Because I think, I think in maybe SaaS and technology, you might see obviously like younger founders that are more than capable, but they are just younger, and they might have like a different view of what an organization looks like. So I think there's probably some of that at play. I do think like on LinkedIn, we always just tend to think like a monolith a little bit. And there's very, I work with organizations that are, I think more, I've worked with organizations I think are more similar to what you kind of are talking about, Adam. So I don't know. It's a good question. There's probably some of that at play, but it's hard to say.
Oh, I was just going to be a smart ass, but I was just going to say, so what's it going to take for you to start like teaching people closed circuit selling within RevOps functions?
Yeah. My deck is stacked. If I could add that to it, I would. But I do think there's some cool ways to implement it, I definitely do.
I'm just stirring, man. But once you see the light, it's hard to unsee the light.
Yeah. It's true.
Sorry, George.
No, all good. I was just going to say, Pasha, before we wrap this up and let you go, without, thinking about, is this really working towards the business goal? Is it making a big impact? You've got Codex open, you got Claude Code open, you've got, what else was it? You had something else open I hadn't heard about yesterday. What's it called?
DeepLine, basically GTM straight through Claude Code. It's pretty nuts. Yeah, it's just almost like a CLI and tapping into all the different APIs. You're kind of just running almost everything you're doing in Clay strictly out of Claude Code, which is very cool. I literally just started using it today.
I'd love to know. I'd love to know, mate, from your perspective with all those things open, is there something that you're working on, you've done recently with them that you were like, oh, that's actually really, really cool? And again, I don't care if it's furthering a business goal or the fundamentals or anything, just something that you're excited about.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things that we've done, right? I took a client's old WordPress site, about 260 pages, completely vibe coded, Claude code in the design, Astro, CMS, Vercel deployment, GitHub backup, and just completely just did the whole. It would have taken me 6 months or to a year in my old days, right? Like full team. And I did it as one person. And honestly, since we got the site up, we've had literally had maybe like a 200K deal come in. And I think that was just based on improved UX. The old site was god awful, right? So that was really cool. I mean, I think where I'm having a lot of fun is not necessarily signal based, right? But just like using these different tools to get my clients data that they really need to answer what I consider are like operationally critical data points. And so for one of my clients, I basically did a scan of all the hospital systems in the DMV area, and we looked at how many hospitals had reports of violence at them, right? Because now when we have that, it's very simple because they're actually going to be doing call-in, they have a talking point. It's simple, right? Like the simple stuff, it's interesting. It's like getting to these data points in a cost-effective manner is great, very cool, and it's generally pretty simple to do, and it can really give somebody a leg up. But it's not necessarily like I'm not like further. I guess it's somewhat simple in nature, but I think it has a lot of bang for the buck. There's been some other cool things that we've done. Like I deployed like a living data dictionary for a client. I posted up about it on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, but just, we used to have to update every time a property is updated. Now I just have a cron job that runs, pulls into properties, sends a Slack alert. Very cool, very lightweight. But now we just always have a running inventory of like, hey, what are we actually recording? Why has it been created? Just makes things easier. So those are like some of the things I've been playing around with. But I think a lot of my job has been, it is at the front end, right? And it's looking at the data, trying to get the data in a better place, and also just trying to get, data points that further sales conversations, for lack of a better way of putting it.
That's awesome. Very, very cool. Adam, I think we will need to discuss after this together, like what else we can lean on and do the same thing. Very, very cool. Pasha, thank you so much for joining us, mate. Thank you for your time. Thank you for doing it in your evening.
Yeah, man.
Always love it when you're here. Always love it when we catch up. Yeah, thank you so much, mate. And for people to find you, follow you, Pasha Irshad, find you on LinkedIn, Shape and Scale for your RevOps needs. Anywhere else we should be pointing people?
No, that's it. LinkedIn and then shapeandscale.co.
Beautiful. Adam, thank you so much for your time too, mate.
Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
A quick note before you go, listeners. You can find more great content and get in touch with us at theb2bplaybook.com.
Be sure to subscribe to this podcast and our newsletter while you're there to get the latest news, tips, and resources from our playbook.
We'll be back the same day and same time with another episode next week.
Thanks for tuning in to the B2B Playbook. Remember, successful B2B marketing starts with the buyer.